Fellas, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You guys know this, but I just left your old home, which was surreal in a whole lot of ways, but it got really surreal when we left there to like go have lunch in Marin, at the Marin, whatever. So you have all these swanky, fancy, wealthy, pretty people, and I'm like, wait, it's too much. I can't take it. But thanks for being here, and the program that actually this all came to me from Lindsay Beck last summer, where she was, I think the original email was like, I got to get you to come to San Quentin. I'm like, nah, I don't think that's gonna happen. But as I learned more and more about the last mile, and I was like, all right, let's do it. And but just seeing what's coming, look at you guys, like Kenyatta, you're here. You walked from work.
Yep.
But that's not the significant. That is a significant thing for you. But go back. How long were you in San Quentin, in prison, in federal prison?
Yeah, I was in the state prison, San Quentin, California prison system for about 19 years. I entered the prison system in 1991, first of all. Got convicted of an armed robbery, pled guilty to 2 counts of robbery, went to prison for a 5-year sentence. After I served about 3.5 years as an inmate firefighter. Got out in 1994. The 2 counts of robbery that I pled guilty to, they automatically turned into 2 strikes when the 3 strikes law was passed. So I was walking around a 3-strike candidate and didn't even know it. More significantly though, during my term in prison, I didn't do any work on myself. And so I basically left prison in 1994 with the same mindset that I entered prison with in 1991.
Right. Which was not a good mindset.
Not a good mindset at all. Within 5 months, I was found to be in possession of a firearm, and convicted of being an ex-felon in possession of a firearm, convicted, and sentenced to 25 to life for possession of a firearm under California's 3 strikes law.
But the armed robbery, was anybody hurt? Or were you just stealing?
There was no physical harm that was done, but emotional harm, definitely.
Yeah.
When you pull a firearm on somebody, you point a firearm at somebody, I mean, that causes definitely emotional,
And you're a kid, right? You did this in probably 1990, right?
1991, I was 22 years old.
22.
Yep.
Alone?
I was with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually got away with the robbery. He went back a week later, tried to rob it again, got caught, and then told on me for the first robbery.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course.
So
we talked about this with the guys today. That was one of the biggest laughs they had. I was like, boys, let me just tell you, when the dude shows up with the badge and the gun, everybody's talking.
Yeah.
Almost everybody. And they just laughed. But yeah, of course he did.
Yeah, that's the way it went down. And he told on me, and so that's part of a big reason why I never got around to taking responsibility for the crime that I committed in 1991 is because I was so, intent on blaming him and, getting revenge on him, and that kind of distracted me from, taking responsibility for.
That doesn't, I've only recently, for me, begun to talk about that because, I wasn't part of an armed robbery or a murder or drugs or anything else, but it was part of drugs, but for my downfall wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for my teammates telling on me, right? And so for years I held this real anger, like fuck these motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Are you serious? But as I've lived with it and as I've gotten close to them again, I realized that wasn't about me, and it really wasn't about them. It was about their families. Like in that position, they're gonna do what they have to do to protect their family.
Yep.
And once I came to that deep, profound, real understanding, that's where true forgiveness comes from. You can look at them like, dude, I would look them in the eyes and be like, I understand, I get it, right? And so very, very, very few instances does somebody truly get your back in that situation. It was just, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's not realistic. And I went through all these different changes to get to the point where I am today, accepting full responsibility and holding myself accountable for what I had done you know, I'm past the blame. I'm past all those games, and I'm moving forward with my life today. And so it feels good. You know, I wouldn't be who I am today had I not gone through all that.
It's so funny. I mean, this is exactly what the conversation I just had with the current class at San Quentin. So I guess I probably should have told the listeners what it is. When we talk about class and the guys, we're talking about, and later in the show, we'll have Chris Redlitz on, who started this amazing program called The Last Mile. So, you know, you have all these dudes in prison, serious prisons for serious crimes that at some point are seriously going to get out, right? For whatever, just because we can't hold all these people. And but The Last Mile came along and taught you guys like you, to code from scratch. Like, it's crazy. Like, I have a tough time with my iPhone sometimes, like just like learning to code from scratch. And you guys are essentially graduating, right, from like a college, right, and getting out into the real world. You're now working at...
I work at a company called Rocket Space, but I got to take a step back because I didn't graduate from the coding program. When we first started The Last Mile,
you preceded it, yeah.
Yeah, it was about the entrepreneurship, and then in 2014 we pivoted towards coding.
Right.
And I was already out by then. I was fortunate enough to meet a guy named Duncan Logan, who's the founder and CEO of Rocket Space. Mm-hmm. He was one of the initial adopters from the business community that came in, that Chris and Beverly actually brought in to you know, help guide us and mentor us about our business aspirations. And so, you know, at our demo day, after our demo day, I just hit him up. I'm like, dude, if I got out of here, you know, tomorrow, would you give me a job? And he said yes. The following year, I was found eligible for resentencing once they changed the 3 strikes law. And I got out. I got resentenced. I got out. And I hit up Duncan. I'm like, hey, man, does that job still exist? Yeah. And he said, yeah. And so I started working at Rocket Space about 2 weeks after that, and I've been there ever since. Been able to start off as an intern, and I've promoted to a management position, and now I'm in sales and in operations with the company. And it's just been a fantastic opportunity. I'm really grateful to Duncan and everybody at Rocket Space for the opportunity.
And Chris Schumacher, we're going to get to your story later, you did come out of the program.
I did.
I mean, we're here with you on, you know, January 2018. You got out
May of 2017.
That's crazy.
It's been a wild ride. You know, I served 17 years in prison for the crime of murder. For me, that was the biggest wake-up call in my life that I could ever imagine, because I never thought that I would be the type of person that takes another man's life. And a lot of it had to do around drugs and alcohol. For me, my time in prison was getting clean and sober, and it was about taking advantage of every learning and growing opportunity that I could to try to take accountability for this crime, to try to develop my skills. And for me, being at San Quentin for the last 10 years was an amazing experience, because I was able to go back to school, I was able to earn a college degree, and I was able to follow in the footsteps of other role models in the San Quentin community like Kenyatta Leal, and got involved with The Last Mile, you know, and what it started as an entrepreneurship program. Where we were coming up with ideas about things we were passionate about, things that involved technology, and also things that had a social cause. So for me, my idea was called Fitness Monkey, and it was an online life coaching service that empowered addiction recovery through physical fitness. And it was a great idea and got a lot of good feedback, but you can't actually operate a business while you're inside prison.
I did see the Fitness Monkey logo right when we walked in, not in the big room, but in the smaller, the first room we stopped in. There's a few. You haven't been back, by the way.
No, I have not been back.
Well, okay, so I was there today. I'm just going to tell you. So if you ever go back, you'll see it. I don't go back for the right reasons, but and I saw it on the wall. I didn't know what Fitness Monkey is. I didn't know that was something you were involved with. I was like, I just figured they do work for fitness. There's other companies up there, but they got you represented on the walls.
Yeah, so that's my idea. And then in 2014, when they started the Code 7370 program, I was able to start learning front-end web development, and we developed a working app for Fitness Monkey.
Yeah.
It's a personal health and recovery tracker. It logs people's clean time, lets them log workouts, and then provides them data and metrics to help them avoid relapse.
And when you say drugs and alcohol, what are we talking about?
I'm talking about...
And we're talking about you, right?
Yeah, me.
Back 20 years ago.
I mean, everything was drinking and drugging and partying. I was living in Hollywood. I thought I wanted to be a rock star. But I was partying like a rock star way before my musical talents ever got me there.
Right.
And so in 2000, I was dealing drugs. Two friends of mine stole a 6-pound suitcase of weed from me, and through those feelings of betrayal and me trying to protect this image, I took a man's life, and that's something I can never take back. And that's, I mean, I think maybe something that we share in common is like when you make a decision that you wish you could take back, and you just can't sometimes.
Right, no.
And so how do we move forward?
Right. No, that's what this whole show is about. That, like, that's what I spoke about this morning to the current class. That's what we talk about almost all the time on this podcast. Is it's not called the forward for nothing, right? It's how do you establish a low point, right? Sometimes the world is society and the forces establish that for you. But once that's established, I think that's also a peaceful place. Like, okay, here. I mean, we saw a lot of guys today. I mean, it's you talk about I mean, walking death row. I mean, that. I'm like, how dudes pacing in their yard, like it was, you can't think, you can't even process that, but trying to establish that low point and then building back, right? And moving forward. And what, Chris, for you, what, he was a friend of yours, the guy who you killed?
Yep.
Or he was just an acquaintance?
He was somebody I knew, not for very long,
right.
But I would call him a friend. He was somebody that I trusted.
Yeah.
And so for him...
And you shot him?
No.
Stabbed him?
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. A lot of these today were the guys that were in there for murder. I was like, how did you do it? And more often than not, they stabbed him, which, in my mind, when you think you kill somebody, you just shoot them, right? But the stabbings... so, and I don't want to get too deep into this, and you can cut me off whenever, but...
Yeah.
As part of this process, for you to get out, to be where you are today, do you have to reconcile all that with his family, his mom, his dad, his brothers, his sisters, his loved ones, his community?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. Understanding victim impact is huge. I mean, it's a part of taking responsibility. It's a part of being accountable. And it's also a part, I think, of making amends, right? Understanding who are the people that you hurt. Like, it just wasn't one man that lost his life. It was a daughter that lost her father. It was an aunt that lost her nephew. And it was a whole community that was harmed by this crime.
Have you? So do you meet with them? Do you sit with them?
So in my situation, I was sentenced to 16 years to life for murder. And what that means is you do 16 years, and then you can start going in front of a parole board. And the parole board wants to hear... you take accountability for the crime. They want to know what kind of behavior you had in prison and what kind of plans that you're going to have in place once you re-enter society before they'll ever deem you suitable for release. So it's not like you can just do your time and go home. You really have to prove yourself, and I felt like I had to prove myself. And during that process, family members are invited by the district attorney,
victim's family member.
To come to the hearing. And in my situation, they didn't show up either time. But what I was able to do is write letters of apology and an accountability statement, taking, complete ownership of what happened and apologizing.
Yep. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's really not, again, I didn't, despite what some people may think, I never killed anybody, but that's been a big part of my process of moving forward, is understanding that along the way, there were some people that got rolled. They didn't get shot or stabbed or hurt, or they did get hurt, maybe in some ways, but, having to sit with them, and that's been, and you can't get everybody, right? In my situation, there are some, it's a fact, that are just like, no, not now, not ever. But, I made it as part of my own journey, and that's what it is a journey, to literally travel the world and like sit with these people and talk about the experience, talk about your feelings, say you're sorry, embarrassed, ashamed. For me, a lot of it's more just, which I'm sure for you guys, it's, you look back on that and you're like, that's just embarrassing, right? And in my situation, I get reminded of it all the time, and it's like, dude, what was I thinking?
I mean, I almost think because you were such an icon, winning all those Tour de France's, amazing athlete, my hero for a long time, and still are, and still can be. But it's almost like when you're at that level, your victim impact is even greater than mine. It's affected more people.
Right. No, that's right. That's the if I was just a cyclist who doped, this is a different story, right? And we talked about that in the class today.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you couple the cancer experience, you couple all the people who were fully invested in that. That's what makes my meltdown, that much more colossal, right? So, Kenyatta, you got a family? You got kids?
I don't have any kids.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Wife?
Not yet.
What is it not to be? I have to ask this, but and this is for both of y'all and anybody that ever got out. Like, how does? But you go out.
Definitely.
You meet a girl in a bar, or restaurant.
Yep.
You're allowed to go to bars.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, I mean, it has to come. I mean, you can't lie about it. You don't want. I can tell you guys, it is what it is. And I heard that you were on a dating site, and like you told the girl, like, I've been away for a while. And she's like, where? You're like, San Quentin.
You've heard the whole story.
And I haven't. That's where I heard you. I told Lindsay to stop. I was like, stop. No, stop right there. I said, he'll tell the story. But like, if you're in a bar and everybody's having a good time, or you're just like, yeah, I was in San Quentin for almost 20 years.
You'd be surprised. I'm really transparent about my past and my experience. Every person that I meet, I want them to hear the story from me and not secondhand. And so, I come out straight out and tell people, and you'd be surprised how many people not only, are just like, they understand, but are receptive to what I'm saying, but they themselves have been impacted by incarceration in some form or fashion, whether it's a family member, a friend, even themselves that have been incarcerated. I swear, every single time I get into a Lyft and I'm taking, a ride somewhere, I get to talking with the Lyft driver. I'd say about 6 out of the 10 Uber or Lyft drivers that I'm in the car with have been impacted by incarceration in some form or fashion. So it's more common than you think, and it's
no, but on not an Uber driver, but like a girl, like, oh, this girl's pretty. I'm sort of feeling this, and it, like, I would be terrified to say, like, yeah, I was.
Well, I tell you,
it's gonna ruin my chance.
I'm not afraid to say it. I say it. If they accept me for that, then cool. If they don't, then that's cool too.
Well, but
they need to hear it from me, though. I don't want them to go on, checkouthisguy.com, and find out that way. I want them to hear it from me. Probably. It should be. Should get that domain, huh?
New business model. No, I think that's right. I think if you own it and you say it, if you play offense, so to speak, on that, I mean, there's a lot of things you could say in a bar to somebody you're interested in that could test them. That's got to be the biggest test.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this. I feel like they deserve a right. Every woman that I meet deserves the right to decide whether or not they want to continue to talk to me. Yeah. And so that needs to come out like right from the very beginning.
Sure.
I have a girlfriend now, so that's not even an issue. But in a situation when that comes up, they need to know.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I put it out there.
And the current girlfriend, her parents, because then it gets
they know. Everybody
deeper
knows.
and deeper.
I've been very transparent about my story. I mean, you put in Kenyatta Leal in your phone, and everything pops up. So.
But in a way, I mean, maybe it was the way you said. To me, you got a little screwed because you didn't know that you had 1 and 2. You thought you had 1, but it should never have been a 2 or a 3. But you had 2 and didn't know it.
Yeah, that was. I tell you, it is what it is. For a long time, I was very bitter, very angry about the whole situation. To this day, I mean, I recognize now that, I couldn't have gotten struck out had I not put myself in that position. I made the choices. I put myself in that position. So, no more blaming about it.
It's interesting walking the yard today and just walking from building to building. A lot of the guys would come up and they would say, and a lot of people say this, but maybe a higher percentage today said, we think you got screwed. And it's, you can't not hear that and feel some level of support. But I respond just like you respond. It's like, look, it is what it is. Here we are. Like,
yep.
Because you or whoever thinks that I got screwed, that's not going to change anything. Like I was dealt this hand, a lot of it by my own, like you would admit as well, a lot of it by my own action, and I get to deal with it, right? And you can deal with it a couple different ways, but the only way to, I've found this place like you all where, it's a positive direction forward.
Yeah, it's really easy to sit in that place called denial and gather all these bits of information to support your position. That's easy. The tough part is taking responsibility and really unpacking everything that you've done. What Chris a moment ago talked about, the impact that it has, not just on yourself, but your family and your community, everybody involved. That's much more difficult to deal with that. And so, to anybody who comes at me like, oh yeah, the system screwed you, I'm like, okay, let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
They haven't got to that point.
And you got to go back to work, so I don't.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
All right. I got a question for you.
Yep.
At this point in your life, what keeps you up at night?
That's a good question. Will the Raiders ever get a defense?
Right.
That keeps me up.
That's what that shows that if that doesn't. I mean, because for 20 years or whatever, there were other things that kept you up at night. If it's a question of whether or not the Raiders get a defense, then life's pretty good.
Yeah, it definitely is good. I have no complaints.
And if I had $1 for every Raiders logo I saw in San Quentin today, it is like there is no other team in the world. I mean, no wonder people think that team and all their fans are a bunch of thugs. Like, every cell had a Raiders. I mean, there was no Cowboys, no 49ers, no Packers, all Raiders. They're moving to Vegas.
Yeah, I'll be there. Raider Nation. Yeah.
Really?
Yes,
sir.
Sir.
You think that whole if they have that much equity with their fans that they're leaving their city and moving to Vegas and they go, that is.
You should come to a game at the Coliseum. You'll see a whole section of people all from LA that are season ticket holders. They come up here for every home game.
Yeah. I mean, the team could move to Moscow and they'd be going.
Raider Nation.
All right.
Till the end.
Thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Pleasure meeting you.
Yeah. One of the guys in the class ran the marathon, so it turns out there's a San Quentin Marathon, and so I'm running it this year.
What's up?
And I'm gonna win. And I've announced, and Chris got a good laugh out of this. I was kind of fucking with the boys afterwards. I was like, "Not any drug testing, is there?"
We got to figure out a way to get him in. That'd be dope.
No, we will.
No, I thought
he's coming in.
in.
No, he's coming.
No,
Chris or me?
Me.
Yeah.
I'm
Both
the one
of you.
that's the hard one getting back in.
You look too fit. You can't keep him out.
I've actually run that
Talk to you
marathon
soon.
twice.
Thanks.
Have you?
See you guys.
See you.
See you, Lindsay.
So the marathon is 110 laps around the yard.
105 laps.
105. And they have the line, and this is for the listener or the viewer. Our video is a little wonky today, but they've got this line, these two lines rather, painted around the yard, and you have to stay. And by the way, it's not a track; it's like less than a sidewalk. You have to stay within the green lines 105 times.
That's right.
Did you win?
I did not win.
Okay,
What do you think the record is?
I don't know what the record is. The one
Because I heard you could beat it by an hour.
No, I didn't say. I told the guy that asked me or that I was talking to about it in class that was I going to win by 20 or 30?
You said 20 initially.
Yeah, I think I can win.
And then you backed off and said 10.
The winner last year went
317.
317.
Yeah, and I think the record is 3:15. Same guy that ran at Markel.
But you have to be a prisoner to get the record. Like if I go run 3:10, I don't get the record.
I mean, if you run the San Quentin Marathon in the fastest time, I think you own the record. You might have to come back every year to defend your title, but
I always joke with people, they're like, because I won other races besides the tour, San Sebastian Classic, the Dauphiné, the Colorado State Mountain Bike Championships, or Nevada City Classic. I always tell people, I'm like, I did win San Sebastian once, but now I'll just say, by the way, I won the San Quentin Marathon. If I can pull it off. I won Anna in.
However, anytime that there's an alarm inside San Quentin, they make everybody sit down. So I ran 84 laps, and there was an alarm somewhere in the prison. Maybe there was a fight. Maybe there was a medical emergency. We had to actually sit down on the yard for almost 15, 20 minutes. And imagine your legs tightening up, your back cramping up, and then when they clear the alarm, then you're supposed to get up and finish the marathon. So, because you're not a prisoner, when the alarm sounds, you got to get down.
Yeah, as a safety thing. Or
Yeah,
as
everybody.
Or as just an obedience thing.
No, I think it's a safety thing. You know, they want to make sure that they got a handle on whatever's going on inside the prison.
And all the other, it's my understanding that during the marathon, I love this talk, this is crazy talk, but during the marathon, the other prisoners are out there as well in the yard, you know, watching the race or cheer, or are they all inside and we're running alone?
No, everybody's out there.
See, I mean, let them know. We got to let the boys know. There's 4,000 inmates at San Quentin. Like,
You will have a crowd.
I want a crowd.
You're going to have a crowd.
They're not going to be cheering for me. They'll be cheering for one of their homies. Yeah, aid stations and everything. They have water. They have.
No, you got to bring your own water.
What?
Yeah, there's well, they might put a pitcher of water out on the scoreboard, but you got to bring your own stuff. And a challenge for me was I was diabetic, right? So there was nobody giving me Gatorade or juice boxes while I was out there. I had to take the jellies out of the peanut butter and jelly lunches and stash them on the corner. So every 5-10 miles, suck down another jelly packet and make sure my blood sugar didn't go too low.
That's like, you know, every endurance geek in the world is like, I have my gels here, I've got my salt tabs, I've got my Scratch Lab drink mix, and you're over here stashing the J out of the PBJ. I mean, that's just Jesus Christ. That's a whole nother set of problems that nobody can relate to. All right, so with us here, Chris Redlitz, who we talked last week. You were walking me through this. I was like, okay, this is amazing. But to see it in person is a whole different experience, obviously. How do you, I know you visited, but how does that then lead to you and your wife, Beverly, creating this amazing organization?
Well, you know, I was invited in this about almost, I guess, 8 years ago, that I was invited in to do a talk on entrepreneurship and business. My day job is I run a venture capital firm here in San Francisco, and a friend of mine was doing some mentoring for some inmates, and she asked me to come in because they had so many questions about business. They had, you know, they really wanted to talk to somebody, and there was no one that they could talk to. And she said, "Would you just come in?" Mm-hmm. And I said no. So I finally relented and went in, and I committed to Beverly. We were living in Marin at the time, and we only lived maybe 15 minutes from prison. And I said, I'm going to do this talk for 30 minutes, and I'll be home. Mm-hmm. And I got in there, and it was a packed room, about 50 guys, and I started talking, and all of a sudden that 30 minutes turned into 3 hours. And it was a conversation that I did not expect. These guys were prepared. They had business plans. And I could see in their eyes, like the entrepreneurs I invested in, I mean, these guys were committed. Like, they wanted to create a better life after they served their time. Obviously, when I got home, Beverly was pretty freaked out because it was, you know, much later than she had thought. But I walked in.
She's like, shit, they kept him.
They kept him,
maybe she was like, thank God they kept him.
You have to ask her later about
I'll
that.
ask her the sequel to this.
Yeah. So I said, you can't believe what I saw. It's amazing. I said, even at that moment, I said, I think we can start a technology incubator in San Quentin. This, like, crazy thought, right? Wow. And she said, no effing way am I going in prison. I mean, literally, like, you know, right. That was her response. And what it did was it really triggered something that, you know, we were so ignorant around and about incarceration in America that I had no idea about recidivism rates or cost of incarceration, nothing. I was really sort of discounting that whole thing. I drove by San Quentin many, many times and never really thought about it. But that really triggered that human element that I experienced, that you experienced today, which maybe you didn't expect. I certainly didn't expect it. And then when I realized that the problem was a huge burden, you know, I'm an investor, and I'm thinking, you know, with 60% recidivism, that's a bad investment for taxpayers. Like, how can we do something? So we basically, you know.
I'll stop you right there. So
yeah.
What is the national or average? What's the average on recidivism? And recidivism is, because when I first heard that word, I was like, okay, let me Google that word.
Yeah.
That's the people that get out that come back, you know, commit crimes again and go right back.
Yeah, I mean, they track it. Basically, recidivism tracks within 3 years of release.
Okay.
So 60% generally, and it varies by state, but, you know, it's safe to say that 60% of people return within 3 years. When you spend in California, it's $60,000 per inmate per year. That's a big burden, and that's just to house them. That's not preparation or anything else. That's just a health, food, bunk. That's it. So we looked at that, and Beverly, you know, she came around. I said, you have to come in prison and see what I saw. So she went in and talked to some of the guys and saw what I saw. And so we said, we're going to do something. And we weren't sure what the public perception or response was going to be. We thought
guys.
To us,
Yeah,
you know, like
right.
you're going to do this. It could have been negative.
Yeah, I just made a note. I was like, there had to be people, right? The families of the victims of these guys that you want to go in and help so they can get out and get actual jobs. Like those people, there had to be a level or a factor of anger with some. I mean, I can understand what I'm saying is I can understand why you would think that, because I just was thinking that.
Sure. Well, we went in and we said, we approached this like we would approach a startup. We said, okay, what are the metrics that we need to see if it's successful? And number one was, are any of the guys inside interested in what we're doing? Are they going to participate? Number two was, are we going to have any support from the outside? You know, people want to come in and help us. And ultimately, will people hire these guys when they get out? So that was important for us to understand all those. We didn't know number three right away, but it was clear when we started, because it was Beverly and I and a few selected volunteers. We basically went in every week for 40 straight weeks at night and sort of made up the program. And it was an entrepreneurship program. We had the guys come up with a passion project. They built a business plan, and then we ended the 6-month program with a demo day where they pitched to a live audience.
What year is this again?
We started in 10. The first demo day was in 2012. And Kenyatta, who was just here, was in our first class.
Yep.
And, you know, he was serving a life sentence. And when we put together the initial class, it was only 5 guys. And I didn't know anybody in prison, obviously. So I went to the prison administration and I said, well, you know, who should I recruit? And Kenyatta's name kept coming up. So I said, I have to meet this guy. And he was serving a life sentence. There was no hope in that point that he was going to get out. And I met him, and he was one of the most enthusiastic, positive people you'd ever meet.
Oh, his energy is amazing.
Yeah, but it was like when that was the way it was when he was serving a life sentence. I'm like, shit, I could build a program around this guy.
Right.
So that's really how it started, and it's progressed from there.
Yeah. You know, when I was driving back into the city here to do this show, I talked to Anna, my fiance, and I told her we walked the yard in death row, and she said, were they all just sitting there depressed?
Yeah.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess you all agree that's a logical question, but having just been there, I was like, I mean, I don't know if they're depressed or not, but they were doing pull-ups and playing basketball. And you know, the scene when we first walked into the courtyard of death row, these 2 guys, Chris hasn't even been in there. These 2 guys, when we first walked in, I was like, oh, they're walking from one end of the courtyard to the other, which, by the way, that's about 12 steps.
Yep.
And we stood there for 20 minutes, and they never stopped.
Yep.
And I said, hey, what are they doing? They do it for hours.
Yep.
They walk side by side, having a conversation, back and forth, back and forth.
Yep.
And they never stopped.
Yep.
And, I mean, that's, you know. So my point is that there's activity. There's basketball games. There's dominoes. There's, you know, there's guys just, you know, doing push-up, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just, but it didn't, none of that, it might be depressing for us to see, but nobody there, I was like, oh my God, this dude's super bummed out. Like, he's depressed. Like, it was, in a lot of ways, they're just like, this is it. This is life. We're going to get on with it.
Right. That's true. And you know, we wanted to build on that. So we said, you know, if there is energy and hope and desire and all those things, like, how do you build on that? So we really took that first class. They just nailed it. Their demo day, each guy just was extraordinary. Chris was at the demo day and he saw it, and he was inspired to join the class after that. But that inspired us, and we started bringing people in from the business community to start meeting these guys, and they started seeing what we saw, and all of a sudden it started to get a life, because it's one thing for me to talk about it, but it's another for someone to experience. So your experience now today changed our conversation last week, right? I mean, now you have a whole different point of view.
As an advocate.
Yeah, I think so. And
but you're saying you need guys to graduate to be on this side to tell that story.
Well, now we do, right?
Now you do.
Yeah, and but for a while we didn't. So, I'd go into class at night and I'm like, if you guys work really hard, you're going to have a job in Silicon Valley. And they're like, yeah, you're just full of shit.
Right. Look at this guy.
And, and one night I could tell that there was just some discontent and the guys were just not in sync. And I sort of did a rant. I'm like, you guys have to believe in this process. You have to believe in the process. Believe me, this is going to work.
Right.
So you saw on the wall, we have that poster today, and it's sort of the mantra of the program, believe in the process and things will work out. And that's really what happened. But we also had to mirror what happens in the real world. So we adopted a zero tolerance program, which means that guys can't step out of line. First of all, they have to have 2 years of clean record, no infractions for 2 years before they even apply to the program. If they have an infraction while they're in the program, they're immediately eliminated from the program. And it's really rigorous. Those guys that you saw today, they're in the computer lab 40 hours a week. And they meet on the weekends. And they're committed. Like, they are committed. And when they get out, they have a work ethic. Like these guys, Chris and Kenyatta, their work ethic is unparalleled.
Yeah, I think that's, and I'm just going to draw a parallel situation in the cancer world where you now have advocates. You have Kenyatta, you have Chris, you have these guys that are now out. And so they can tell the story and you can build around that and raise around that in the cancer world, right? So the deadliest cancer that there is lung cancer.
Yeah.
The cancer that gets the least funding is lung cancer. And the reason is nobody survives, or very, very few. You don't have anybody on the streets, whereas breast cancer, for example, and I'm not picking a disease here or a cell type, but there are millions of women that are breast cancer survivors, and they let everybody know, and they raise money, and they tell that story. They go to Capitol Hill, they go to the NCI, they go so that's where the money goes. So it's the same thing. Like if you don't have survivors, like Chris is a survivor, then you can't build a story around that. And that's that's what I guess that's what we're doing right here today.
Yeah, and I just want to say that that there, I guess the one sort of pushback was, you're giving these guys an opportunity. They obviously committed a crime and whatever level of crime that was, and you're giving them this opportunity. And the response really is, they're all getting out. Like 95% of the guys are getting out. That's so right. The question is, who do you want them to be? And now you see what they can be. And it's not only that they're doing well for themselves, they're doing well for their family. They're going back to their community. I think Kenyatta or Chris mentioned that we require that they have a social cause. So they have to go back to their community. So, it's one of those things, we're saving money and we're reducing recidivism, but we're also impacting communities now moving forward.
And you have other speakers. Like I wasn't the only person that you roped into coming in there. And in this world, right, the computer world, the coding world, I mean, like the reigning champ was there a few months ago, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. I
mean, that's like, how cool is that? And now you have a graduate who's now, well, I won't name his name because he's making so much jack now that the IRS he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars working at Facebook. Or he's making good money.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say what he's making. But the ironic thing is that it was actually 2014 that Mark came in, and Ali Tambura met him there. There was a picture that actually Mark posted on his Facebook page that day that's become sort of one of the sort of signature pictures of Ali and Mark in prison. And now Mark works for the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. So he actually works for Mark today, which is pretty extraordinary.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how do you fund this whole thing, or do you take donations? I mean, it's a 501c3. I'm assuming, and you take donations, have fundraisers, or is this all you and Beverly?
Well, it was all us to begin with.
Of course.
And we really did that purposely because we wanted to prove that it worked. And we didn't want to go out and solicit anyone or anything until we had proof points. So for the first few years, we made that commitment. Today, it's really a combination of private funds and also the state. The state has really stepped up. What you came in today in San Quentin, the building you were in today used to be the old print factory. And I saw that about 5 years ago. I got a chance to tour around in some of the nooks and crannies in the prison and this old building was sitting there unused. And I asked somebody, like, what is this? And they said, well, this old print factory has been dormant for 8 years or so. I said, I want this building. So we, through a lot of support, CalPIA, which is Prison Industries, CDCR, Chuck Patillo, who runs Prison Industries, a huge advocate for us. Today, we're actually in the process of remodeling, and you walk through that right now. Yeah. It's 22,000 square feet.
Major renovation.
Yep. Full power upgrade, new power grid, fully wireless. We'll have 8 classrooms in there. So that will be the prototype of our program, really, and what we can do moving forward. So, the idea is we'll have multiple classes in there. We have our business, the joint venture that we run out of there, which we can talk about as well. But that just shows that, it works, but also the state was, I guess, reluctantly supportive of us initially. Now they're fully behind us because they see the results. And
San Quentin isn't your only franchise. I mean,
no, we're in 5 prisons in California, 2 women's prisons. We're opening 3 more this spring in California. And then I'm actually flying on Monday to Indiana, and we're having a press conference with the governor, and we're opening our first prison outside of California in Indianapolis. Yeah, I mean,
looks like it's working.
Yeah, it's for sure it's working, and our goal is to franchise this across the country under our nonprofit. We really believe within the next 5 years we can be in at least 50 prisons.
And when we talked on the phone, I mean, I was just stupidly or incorrectly so just assumed somebody, goes to the program, gets this education, comes out, gets a great job, and it's just the pull, whether it's old friends or old habits or just gets that pull. I just worked off the assumption there had to be a couple guys that go straight back. And I asked you, and you said in the 6 or 7 years, there's been 0 cases. So here you told me if you're just a normal prisoner, you get out, 60% of them turn right around and go back.
That's right.
And after the last mile, that's 0%.
That's right.
Amazing.
I think it's part of it is, the key thing is having a job. So these guys have jobs, but they also create a community. The last mile community, the guys really support each other, and Chris can acknowledge that for sure, that this is a tight community. These guys, a brotherhood, sisterhood that we help create. And it's also every ethnicity. When you walked through that steel door today, literally it's a big steel door you have to walk through to get to the classroom. There's segregation and prejudice on one side of the wall in the yard. On the other side, there's not. In our classroom, every ethnicity is represented. These guys sit side by side, and they learn to work with each other. Yeah. So it's really a beautiful thing to see that not only are they learning a trade, but they're learning how to operate in the real world and treat each other like human beings.
Yeah. Chris Schumacher, I want to talk about San Quentin, the place. Well said, Chris. I got too many Chris's here today, but let's talk about the prison itself. I looked online. So San Quentin was opened in 1866. Right, there was nothing. If you drive by now, it's absolutely gorgeous. You leave Marin, you're headed to the East Bay. It's absolutely beautiful. But this thing was the first thing there, probably 1866.
Yep, exactly.
And what most people, because the name carries a certain aura, like you're like, oh, San Quentin. But in reality, San Quentin, and educate me here on this, Chris Schumacher, like there's different tiers of prisons. Level 4 is the worst of the worst, and then I don't know what. But San Quentin is actually a level 2. So people, in a lot of ways, for even all of its mystique, guys want to be in San Quentin. Is that right? Or, I mean, they don't want to be there, but they'd rather be there than a 4.
No, I would agree with that. I spent the last 10 years of my 17-year incarceration at San Quentin, and I realized that it used to have a very violent and notorious reputation. In the 80s, it was actually a level 4 yard. So maybe the stairs that you walk down to get down to the yard, that used to be called Blood Alley. And for good reason.
And sorry, what makes it a 4? Just the security, the violence inside, the offenders, the guys that are inside, or what?
It's the offenders. Okay. Classification score. So as a young man with a long term like I had when I first started out, I was classified level 4, and they asked me what prison I would like to go to. I'm from LA, so they said, "Would you like to go someplace close to home?" I'm like, "Sure." Next thing I know, I'm on a bus 11 hours up to Susanville, California, to High Desert State Prison. And if you can imagine,
That's level 4.
That's level 4.
Yeah.
First time on the yard with guards on the wall with mini 14s pointing down at you. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs behind my back, walking through the snow, and I look up on the big white walls and I see a sign that says no warning shots will be fired. And that's how you know it's serious.
Well, yeah. Yeah, we saw some guys getting, I don't know, getting registered, checked in, or their first day,
Reception,
their
yeah.
Reception. Yeah, I guess you can. I guess it is a reception. It's
called
not the
reception
reception
center,
you ever
yeah.
wanted.
Yep.
But I can't even imagine like that first day. I mean, you know what you did. You know what happened. So you know you're going to get in trouble. But like that first day where you're like, all right, man, this is it. Like, I'm here. And I can't even imagine. And we looked at a lot of these guys, and I'm like, what is going through their head?
Yeah, I mean, you learn to sink or swim pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And for me, that meant putting away a lot of the past behaviors. That meant no drinking. That meant no drugs. It didn't mean I wasn't going to avoid trouble entirely because of the environment that I was in. But what it did do is keep my head screwed on straight. And you also learn to keep your head on a swivel, too, to see any dangers that were coming around the corner. But as you stay out of trouble,
Yep.
and as you continue to positive program and take advantage of anything that's available, and on the level 4s, there's not much offered. And actually, in the state of California, I believe that San Quentin is unique in the fact of the amount of programs that it has and the amount of volunteers that come in from the outside. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is the only prison in California with a death row, but it's also right here in the Bay Area. And so its reputation actually brought a lot of volunteers and programs inside San Quentin. I'd like to talk about the last mile for a second,
Yeah,
because
sure.
this program, I was there for 10 years at San Quentin. Like I said, I did college, I did self-help, I did AA, I did NA, and there was a lot of programs that you could do to work on maybe the issues that I was having, whether it's anger or addiction or emotional intelligence, things like that. But the Last Mile was the first program that I saw that was really going to prepare me for what life was going to be like after prison. And honestly, that was my biggest fear throughout my entire incarceration, is when and if the day ever comes when the parole board says it's time to go home, what's life going to be like?
Right.
Who's going to give me a chance? Where am I going to work? Where am I going to live? And I still remember when Chris Redletts came in, and the first night of class, him and Beverly stood up there and said, if you'll put your heads down and work hard and learn everything you can in this program, there's going to be an opportunity waiting for you when you got out. And I didn't know when that day was at the time, but I believed him and I believed in the process.
Pretty convincing.
And it even gets me emotional now just thinking about it, because that was 5 years ago.
Yep.
5 years ago, and I never thought I'd be sitting here today in a podcast with Lance Armstrong talking about being a coder in San Francisco, going through a program that taught me, I knew nothing about coding. Computers for my first 14 years in prison were taboo. Nobody had access to computers before the Last Mile brought him into San Quentin. So to learn these skills while I was inside and fall in love with it at the same time, right? I was born to be a computer programmer.
But is there, because you're a musician too.
I was a musician. Thought I wanted to be a rock and roll star.
But you still know how to play the guitar.
Turns out I'm more of a campfire guitarist.
I have a lot of guests on here that play the guitar, and if I'd have had my head on right, I'd have had a guitar here, and you could have jammed something for us. But it seems like there's almost like something to the rhythm of it, or just the mindset of it. Or you can tell me if I'm wrong, but music is coding too. Like, or am I can't do either of them, so I'm making this up. But maybe you weren't so far from being a natural talent.
You actually bring up an interesting point that I hadn't thought about, because I knew that while I was in college, I loved math. And also,
Wait, so which college?
Patton College inside San Quentin.
Okay, yeah, that college.
Was able to earn an AA degree, loved algebra, geometry, physics. Those were my jam before coding. But at the same time, I've always had an aptitude for languages. Before prison, I was in the United States Air Force in Monterey, California, learning Korean, going to be a linguist. So these two things, math and language, combined perfectly with computer programming.
Yep.
And then I like the aspect of bringing the music into it, maybe a fluidity or a creativity.
Yeah. Well, the language component, that's whatever it is in the brain that can play an instrument is also, in my opinion, the thing that can 'cause there are certain people, they can't learn Spanish or French or Korean to save their lives. They're just not, they don't have it, right? And some people do, right? And obviously the younger you start, the easier it is. But I think there's a correlation between certainly music and language. But I would go out on a limb and say it has to be something there with coding. I mean, you look, it was fate.
Yeah, and I think that's there's a bit of a misconception that you have to be, a college graduate, you have to go to a top school to be a good coder. It's just not the case. We found that Chris, who was hired by Fandom, now where he works as a software engineer, he wasn't given the job. He had to actually go through an interview to become a software engineer.
Yeah, so you don't have it set up. You, Chris Redless, I have started this amazing charity, and I'm going to get these guys out. You're a successful VC guy here in San Francisco. It would be easy for you to go, okay, guys, I have this other project, and I'm going to have 5 guys in the next however many, this year, and I need you to give them a job. So that nobody's given. I think that's a great point.
No,
you got to compete.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not a gift.
Yeah.
I mean, even when Kenyatta talked about Duncan Logan coming in and hiring him, Duncan did it because he knew he'd be a damn good employee. Mm-hmm. He didn't do it as a gift, even though Duncan and I are friends. It's not the reason he got the job.
Right.
But you've got guys that start, literally guys that had never seen the internet become phenomenal software engineers. So it's taking that blank canvas. They had no idea about coding, but it was just natural for them. And it's amazing to see. It's one of those fantastic social experiments, frankly. Yeah. That because you can't find people out here today that haven't had some exposure to some sort of web-related apps being on the internet. Right. These guys have zero, and they become great coders. It's phenomenal.
So Chris Schumacher, and we've touched on this, and you guys warned me about this before we went in. It wasn't so much as a warning; it was just like a heads up. Like, prison life is very segregated. It is not. When you get through that steel door and you're in the classroom at the last mile, I spoke to that room today. That is the most diverse place that I've seen in a long time, whether it's Hispanics, Asians, African Americans, white dudes. I mean, but the yard is very segregated. And my question is that just sort of the blacks stick to the blacks and the whites stick to the whites and the Hispanics, or is that sort of, or does the prison actually encourage that, force that, or is that just guys just hanging with their own type?
Yeah, that's the guys inside California. I mean, the prison does back it up in the fact that when you first arrive, you only cell up with people of your own race.
Yep.
So I would say they have a part in it there. But a lot of it's the guys on the yard choose who they want to hang out with. And a lot of that mentality filters down from the level 4s. So when I first got there, they said, don't walk the yard with anybody of another race. Don't play chess with anybody of another race. And being so young and really not knowing the lay of the land, when in Rome, you do as the Romans do. And that was incredibly difficult for me. So as the levels or your points came down and you went down in levels, some of those in-house politics lightened up a little bit. So at San Quentin, guys were able to play sports. The run team was integrated, the tennis team was integrated. And then the last mile program, the coding class.
Super
integrated. And it's so important because, I mean, that's the way the world works, right? Everybody doesn't just sit in their own box out here in the real world. And so it taught us, a lot of how to get along with other people, and it also taught me a lot about the type of person that I want to be.
Right. When you say you went in, you figured out real quick that you needed to figure out how to sink or you were going to decide sink or swim. And does that mean staying in your lane and just staying out of harm's way, or just staying out of conflict, or does that, because you have to, there has to be conflict in prison. I don't care how much you want to stay in your lane. Somebody interrupts that walk.
Sure. I mean, it's very easy to fall into a group, and everybody's grouped up by race in prison. And I still remember the first day on the yard at High Desert Prison when we were released out to the yard, and all the different groups go to their certain area and they greet each other. And I remember them saying, doing a church call, meaning any of the guys that wanted to go to church could go line up at this door. And so after greeting all the fellas, I started heading across the yard, and I remember looking back, and I saw that I was the only person walking across the yard.
To church.
Yeah, to church. And there wasn't like a more lonely or scary feeling like at that point, because I was kind of essentially separating myself from the pack. But I look back at that decision now, the fact that I was willing to stand on my own 2 feet and do what I knew in my heart was right. You know, I made it a spiritual decision to become somebody different. And for every time that I was able to do that, I felt like God had my back.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, when we were walking through Death Row, there were a lot of dudes playing basketball and pull-ups and dominoes and everything outside, and we walked by the church, chapel. Or the Death Row Chapel, which is not, there's not a chaplain there or a preacher there. It's on video.
That's right.
There were not many guys in there.
No, it was 3.
I counted 2, but you're smarter than me. But there was a lot of space.
Yeah, there was a lot of space.
It was yeah. And somebody else told me that whatever temptation, let's just call it temptation, drugs, alcohol, whatever you want to get on the outside, you can get on the inside.
True.
Is that really true?
That's very true.
So if it's cocaine, oxys, marijuana, alcohol.
Yes.
I wouldn't be your guy to get those things.
I understand.
However,
and if you are, this would be a really bad time to say that you are.
Thanks for that legal advice, Lance.
Yeah. We'll edit that out in case you are the guy. No, but so that's just, I mean, I guess, you know, I think that's going to be easier in the future as drones become nicer and nicer and quieter. But how does that get in a prison? That has to come from a guard or a kitchen worker or
Yes, a variety of visitors, or I mean, there are a lot of different avenues where things come inside. You know, contraband. A lot of people have cell phones inside. That's big contraband because that's not, not something that the prison wants to allow for outside communication that's not supervised.
You know, the other thing that struck me, and you guys, Chris, you've been there enough as a visitor, you've been there enough as a resident, is how guys can customize their space, their cell, right? If you watch the movies, right, you're walking down the line, there's metal bars and there's a metal bed with a mattress and sheets and that's it, and a metal toilet. But every cell, it's like, this is probably a bad analogy, but it's like kids go off to college, their dorm, like they customize them, they have posters and blah, blah, blah. Every cell was customized, and these guys have, bookshelves, and they have, coverings over. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, I was just shocked by that.
But you went inside, though. You walked in one of the cells. You saw how small they are.
Yeah, and I walked in one of the cells that wasn't being used at the time. So it had the mattress, but it was in one of the. I really wanted to go in one of these. I wanted to go in one of the ones that had been totally tricked out by these guys while he's out in the yard. But no, there's not. You got to be creative with how you utilize space. I mean, you can barely get past the bunks. So in the regular population, this is important to know, there's 2 guys per cell. Mm-hmm. Death row, the only upgrade about death row is you get your own cell. Yeah. But you're on death row. Yeah. But you can barely get past these bunks, and then as soon as you get past them, you hit the toilet. Like.
Yeah, they're 4x9.
Yeah.
There's a bunk bed, and 2 guys live there. And remember that when there's a lockdown, they're in that cell 23 hours a day. So you can't, you got to have a good relationship with your cellie.
Right. And I asked today if you get to pick your roommate, and the answer came back from the kid who was photographing us, who worked for the San Quentin News. Thank you guys for giving me a baseball cap. Said that when you first get there, you don't get to pick, but over time, if you behave right, et cetera, you can kind of pick your buddy or who you're most comfortable being with.
Yeah. One of the amazing things is Darnell Hill, who was also a graduate from the Last Mile. He served 24 years. He was his dad's cellmate in San Quentin in 1991.
Wow.
Pretty crazy, right? They were convicted together of robbery, and his dad basically recruited his son to do robberies with him. They actually spent time in San Quentin together. It was pretty amazing.
Amazing. And you had your guitar.
I did have my guitar in the cell, up on the towel rack in between the locker, wedged, just so. Didn't play it a whole lot.
Frankly, I never heard him play, so I'm not sure if he's telling the truth or not. There,
we can just keep building this story up.
Yeah, next thing you know, who's with you know.
Maybe he was the real Johnny Cash. I'm not sure.
Who needs a guitarist? I don't know. Alice in Chains is going back out on the road. Maybe you could go out with them or something.
Yeah, for me, it was just.
You don't need to be on the road as a rock star.
No, I got a 50-mile radius now. We got parole issues to deal with.
You got. Yeah, you're like, life.
You know, you talked about bars or restaurants. You know, bars are out of the equation for me.
You don't go to.
Can't go to any place where serving alcohol is a primary function.
You cannot, or you
I
choose
cannot,
not to.
No, I cannot, and I choose not to.
So as part of the parole, you cannot visit an establishment that serves alcohol.
Where serving alcohol is the primary
So
function,
a bar,
a liquor store or bar or something like that.
And how long does that last?
At least 5 years.
Yep.
At least 5 years. And that means travel restrictions. You know, I can't go outside a 50-mile radius without permission from my parole agent.
Mm-hmm.
But this past Christmas, they did grant me 5 days to go down to LA and visit my mom.
Your mom was there. I heard your mom and your sister were there the day you walked out.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
when you walked out or when you went to LA?
Both. However, but let's just, back up a little bit. Imagine serving 17 years when my mom and my sister were my biggest supporters throughout the whole thing. You know, they spent so many Christmases and holidays inside the visiting rooms of San Quentin. And so for me to finally be granted release and to get out on that day and have them there waiting for me, I felt like they got out of prison.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, because they lived it with me. And not to mention Chris Redlitz and Beverly Perenni were there too.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about this as a program, but it's also a family. It's a fraternity. The 20 or 30 guys that have gotten out so far, I'm in contact with all of them. And we support each other out here too. So that means if there's challenges, if there's problems, if Eddie Griffin has a mild heart attack, Chris was on the horn saying, you know, call him, support your brother. And I think that's important. So this program is giving guys job skills. But
it's
it's
like a
also
fraternity.
teaching, how to be as men and human beings.
You got a love interest, a lady?
I think you already blasted that out there a little bit, but you know, when I got out, I can't go to a bar, right? So there's no single bars in my future, but there are dating apps.
Yeah.
And so I was chatting around on the dating app, and saw a nice girl, and I texted, "Hey, you're in Concord, I'm in Concord. Why don't you show me around?" And she said, "Oh, you're new in town. Where'd you come from?"
Oh, wow.
So here's the moment of truth, right? What do you say? And so I texted in San Quentin. And she said, "You were in prison?" And I could do nothing but say yes, you know. And I think it's really important to be transparent with people and be honest with people. And there was no turning back at that point. And so over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, it took me 2 or 3 weeks of a lot of texting, a lot of explaining.
I don't know why.
She gave me a chance. She ran, I'm a runner. She rides bikes, I ride bikes. So our first date was actually a bike riding date down to the park. We chatted, we got to know each other, ate some ice cream and tacos, and we've been dating ever since.
That's amazing. Wow. I mean, that's just, yeah. I mean, it would be very easy for her to just be like, block.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? I mean, that takes, but also for you to, I mean, at this point in your life, you just have to say, yeah, I was. Yeah, just right around the corner up here. Yeah, well, good luck to y'all. Who's stronger on the bike? Please say her. Please say her.
It's got to be her, right?
You lost a lot of fitness in there. You were away for 17 years. You couldn't ride. I mean, I get it.
You know, actually, fitness has been my recovery.
No, you look plenty fit. I mean, you're freaking me out a little. You're all leaned out.
He is leaned out.
He is leaned out.
Yeah. I invited you on that run tonight. It's too bad you had that plane to catch.
I gotta go. Well, you know, these 5 kids, they don't, running with Chris Schumacher is not. They're gonna be like, who?
Yeah. Right.
They're gonna be like, who, until they listen to this podcast because it's so powerful. But no, I'm in this city a lot, and and we'll be running whenever you want to run.
So we got to train for that San Quentin Marathon,
And
right?
I train every day. I'll be ready.
All right.
I'll be ready. I just don't want anybody cutting corners. You know what I'm saying?
Trust me, they don't cut corners.
Anybody cuts corners, they're going to trip them on the basketball court, so look out.
Yeah. Chris Schumacher, thank you. Chris Redlitz, thank you. Thank you for taking me in. And, in life you have these moments where you're just like, okay, that just changed my life forever. And today was one of those days. And the other thing I want to point out too, and I said it to the class, and I don't know if it means anything to them or means anything to anybody listening, but everybody I told I was going to San Quentin were like, are you scared? Are you worried? Yeah. And I said, no. I mean, I just assumed that we were part of an entourage that was safe. And but that doesn't matter, because once you get there, then the rubber hits the road. Yeah. I never felt threatened. I never felt unsafe. Yeah. All the guys are like, what's up, Lance? What's up? What's up? I mean, there was so much to the point where Lindsay was like, is it always like this? And I'm like, I mean, there was this connection. I mean, I guess I am in some ways kind of a thug, but I never ever, even and we were deep into death row. Like I never felt unsafe. And yes, there's guards everywhere, and yes, but even for somebody spitting on you or yelling at, I never felt like I was scared, I guess is the word.
Well, it's funny. We did a talk at Stanford a few years ago, and we were with one of our graduates, Horatio Hartz. And someone asked me when we do Q&A, and someone in the audience asked me, and they said, are you scared or blah, blah, blah. And I started to answer. And Ray said, Chris, let me answer that for you. He said, you have to understand that people like Chris and Beverly and those that give us a chance, we have their back. Mm-hmm. Like there are guys in the yard looking out for you, Lance, because you're part of this thing, right? Mm-hmm. You may not know they're watching out for you, but they are. Mm-hmm. And that's important. It's like we become so ingrained in this, and it's so important that the community that is prison community really respects that. So, you can never really drop your guard completely because you're in prison, but you have to know that there is a real genuine support, so that's super important. Yeah. And I also want to say that, when Lindsay first approached me about, doing this, I really didn't have any frame of reference of where you were in this world, mm-hmm. right? I, like everyone else, followed you and saw your mm-hmm. sort of post-release discussion and then sort of lost touch. She's like, and I'm like, what's his motivation? What's he want to do? And she said, well, you need to listen to some of his podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I did. I told you on the phone the other day, and it seemed to me that there was this point in time, and we talked about that today in prison, about the sort of the switch hit, and you realize this importance of transparency, like we talked about with these guys. And it so resonated today with this community. I mean, you saw it with the guys. Yeah. It so resonated with them that I really do appreciate you coming in. And I'm all the way there with you.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
I have one last question for Chris Schumacher. Because somebody asked me this question the other day, and I said, you know what, I'm going to steal that question. I asked Kenyatta earlier, but what keeps you up at night?
That was... I was thinking about that question. Last night, what kept me up was...
we have a new girlfriend, so we don't need to know any of that.
I'm still living in a transitional house in Concord. Mm-hmm. And today, a man named Robin is getting released from San Quentin after serving 44 years. And that's going to be my new roommate. So what kept me up was cleaning up the room and getting it ready for him.
But no other stress, nothing in your head that...
if you asked me that question a year ago, you asked what keeps you up at night, it's like, what's life going to be like after I get out of prison? Right. It was my biggest fear. It weighed over me because I didn't know. And getting out and being able to work an internship with the Last Mile, where we're building a learning management system that's basically packaging the coding program at San Quentin, putting it into a piece of software, and then we're going to distribute it to other prisons throughout California. I mean, that was an amazing gift, right? Because not only did I get the skills while I was inside, now I'm creating something that's going to help other men to code. Yeah. And here's the other thing that, why I'm so out there today about my crime and taking ownership and being transparent is because I want people to know that the men inside prison aren't what the media makes them out to be. Just like you aren't
Right.
everything that the media makes it out to be.
true.
Sometimes we're more, sometimes we're less,
Right.
but there are a lot of men working their ass off in San Quentin to try to make amends for those crimes they committed. And those are the ones I believe that deserve a second chance.
Yeah. There's nothing else to say. Thanks, fellas.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Amazing.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for today.
All right.